Chapter 29, Section 1. So, since we've talked about the beginning of Christianity, the Catholic Church, that Roman Catholic Church, has really been the only church. But it wasn't changing with the rest of Europe. And you started seeing people calling for a reformation or a change. Many of the church leaders don't want change. They were afraid if things changed, they would lose their power. And so that's going to bring us to Martin Luther. Martin Luther was a German monk, faithful to the church, the Roman Catholic Church, but he can't find peace of mind. He wonders, how's God going to judge his actions? Has he done enough? And so he's studying the New Testament, looking for answers to the question. And what he starts to discover is, according to the Bible, he needs to trust in Jesus rather than just doing good works. Good Christians still do good things, good works, but that's not why they were saved. They're saved because they trust in Jesus. These ideas conflict with what the Roman Catholic Church taught. Pope Leo X, he needs money to rebuild St. Peter's Church in Rome. And so he's going to send out monks to sell what's called indulgences. These were documents that freed, the owner of the document from the punishment they were due to receive for their sins. They did bad things, and this document basically says they would be forgiven of those bad things. Martin Luther, he believed this led people to think they could just buy forgiveness of sins. And this really bothers him, and he's going to end up writing 95 theses or statements of belief. And he's going to nail these 95 theses to a door of the church in Wittenberg, Germany. And these theses contains ideas like only God can forgive sins. The Pope's just a man. He can make mistakes. Your true guide to truth is the Bible. Everybody has a right to read the Bible. Everyone has a right to pray, for help without the help of the priest. You can pray on your own. This really ticks off Pope Leo X. He condemned Luther's teachings. Actually, he excommunicated him, kicked him out of the church. Luther, in return, publicly burnt the papal order that ordered Luther to give up his beliefs. So Pope Leo, he wants the German Emperor, Charles V, to try Luther as a heretic, put him on trial. So Charles has a decision. Either he could remain loyal to the church, or he could ignore it. The problem is Charles needs support from the princes that do support Luther. And so when he goes and he arrests Luther, he promises those princes that Luther will have a fair trial. Luther is put on trial by the German Diet of Worms, but he refused to give up his ideas. And he is going to be condemned of heresy. And as we all know, we've talked about many times, heresy could result in the death sentence. And so the German princes that supported him actually hid Luther to keep him from being killed. So here, let's see exactly how this went down here. So we'll move on with this story into chapter 29, section 2. So by 1524, most of northern Germany supported Luther. And they're going to end up forming what's called the Lutheran Church. Charles can't defeat the Lutheran princes. And so he ends up signing the Peace of Augsburg, which allows Catholic and Lutheran churches in Germany. And Luther's ideas aren't just going to stay in Germany. They're going to spread across Europe. In Switzerland, you end up with something called Reformed churches. So what you end up here is Lutheran churches and Reformed churches end up being called Protestant churches because they protested against Catholic ideas. And their leaders are going to become called ministers rather than priests. Their services were easier for people to understand. They spent more time teaching from the Bible, and they spoke in the language of the area. They spoke in German if there was German people or whatever. Not in Latin, what a lot of people didn't understand Latin. This brings us to Ulrich Zwingli. He's going to lead a movement in Switzerland. He broke completely from Catholic rituals. He removed images from the churches. He closed the monasteries. He actually ends up being killed while battling Catholic forces. Another big name in this movement you're going to see is John Calvin. John Calvin, he's going to set up the first Protestant church governed by a council of ministers and elected leaders. John Calvin also believed that God knows and controls everything of the past, everything of the present, and everything of the future. Even to the point where Calvin decided, or Calvin figures that God decided in the beginning who was going to be saved. This is an idea called predestination. Nothing you can do could affect it. God already knew who was going to be saved and who wouldn't. Calvin is going to have the Geneva Town Council post his rules of behavior. No dancing, no cards, no theater, no drinking, 9 p.m. bedtime. Violators of these laws could be imprisoned or banished or even executed. People were taught to work hard and save money. A lot of the rich merchants supported this. And Geneva improved. Geneva became a better place. And persecuted Protestants from all over Europe are going to come to Geneva to live there.